Hello everyone, Kyle here from Wide Awake PH. In today's episode, we'll be talking about the Timemore B75 flat bottom brewer. The Timemore B75 is one of the few examples of a modern plastic flat bottom dripper that's easily accessible in the market right now, the Philippine market that is. So in Shopee and Lazada, this is retailing for only 875 pesos, which is right around the price point of something like the Origami Air, but it's also a lot more affordable than other flat bottom brewers, modern flat bottom brewers that is, such as April, the April brewer, and something like the Oria brewer. So given that it is sort of an entry-level, modern, plastic, flat-bottom brewer, I think it's not being talked about so much for something that is so interesting and original in design. So in today's episode, we'll be going over the B75's design, aesthetics, and see how it can help us brew tastier coffees. The B75 comes in two colors. It comes in this clear version or transparent version, and it comes in a gray, sort of more translucent kind of finish version. So obviously, I opted for this transparent one. I like actually how this looks because of the way the dripper reflects light. It has a very crystal-like vibe to it, which I find very attractive. For the material, it's using PCTG plastic, so it's a very thick and dense plastic. You actually have to experience this thing in the hand and compare it to other sort of cheaper feeling plastics to really appreciate how dense and thick this material actually is. So in the 2 or so months that I've been using this, I haven't really acquired, or the dripper hasn't really acquired any surface scratches, unlike the Kono dripper. So I think it will be a really good and durable option. The base of the brewer has a 5.5 cm diameter and a height of 6 cm. So in our testing, the optimal brew size for this is around 12 to 16 grams of coffee. So we find that the brews are tastiest in those sizes. So the industrial design of the B75 is very interesting. So obviously it's a unique product. So let's go over those features together. So it has these 20 ribs going around the walls of the brewer to really hold the filter in place. The walls are slanted or angled at a 75-degree angle to promote a faster flow rate. So you can see it's rather steep, right? Like, it's not completely vertical, of course, but it's at that 75-degree angle, unlike other brewers like the April, for example. That's why this will most likely be faster. And lastly, the base of the brewer really is interesting because of the way this is shaped and how it interacts with the other features of the brewer. The base allows air to flow in and out of the brewer very efficiently. And because it has 10 really big holes, so the combination of those two features means that the flow rate on this is rather fast for a flat bottom brewer. So as we know, or maybe you don't know, so let me explain. Cone-shaped brewers, right? They're usually angled more steep. The advantage with those is you have a very fast and consistent flow rate. Whereas flat bottom brewers, like traditional ones, I mean, like the Kalito, they have a rather slow flow rate because of the way the holes are shaped, because of the way the brewer is shaped. So these modern style flat bottom brewers are trying to correct the problems that the Kalito wave still has, especially the steel one. So yeah, this is why it's an interesting brewer and it's worth looking into. Let's get to brewing. Today we'll be brewing Peru La Estrella. This has been a customer favorite. It's selling very well, and we can see why. So what's interesting with Peru is that we can brew it many ways. One approach is to go slightly coarser and then to do just 2 pours. So in that way, we're emphasizing clarity over body. We're emphasizing clarity over body and sweetness. You can do that, and you'll get a lot of berries and a lighter mouthfeel. So that's one way of doing it, if that's your preference. Another way to do it is emphasize or increase contact time by grinding fine and structuring the way you pour, to do like a 3-pour structure or 4-pour structure even. And that method will really emphasize sweetness and tactility when you're drinking this coffee. And that way you'll get to experience more of the chocolates, the butterscotch flavor and aromas that's present in this coffee. And of course, what I'm just sharing with you are 2 extreme ways of brewing this coffee, and finding that middle point to where you want it is the most fun part. So, okay, now that we're gonna brew, I just want to say that, as I've just illustrated, it's very difficult to make a blanket recipe for success with anything, because it really relies on your taste preferences, the coffee you're working with, the water you're working with, and the equipment you have. So I would rather give you a more iterative style of approach to your brewing, because I think that's more helpful. So just a few tips for success here. We're using the Kalito wave filters, and we find that it's actually rather helpful to buy the 50-piece version of the Kalito wave rather than the 100. Why? Because it has this cardboard box to protect the paper filters, right? Because the problem with these paper filters, if they get deformed from shipping, then it's pretty much useless because it doesn't take the shape of the brewer that well. Okay, so keep that in mind. Of course, you can buy the 100-piece one if you're in a store somewhere, you take it home and then you take care of it. Like you have a case for it, like you can do that. But if you're buying from Shopee or Lazada, this is a better bet. Slightly pricier, sure, but trust me, it's worth it. Okay, so now we will preheat the brewer and pre-wet this paper filter. This is how I like to do it. Very simple. When you get this brewer first and you want to play around with it, I recommend doing a fixed dose size of just 13 grams and a fixed brewing amount, a brew water amount of 200 ml. Just keep that fixed so that you're not continuously playing around with those 2 important factors. Okay, what we will change around is brew temperature, grind size, and pouring structure. So, with brewing temperature, I recommend starting off with 92 to 95 degrees Celsius. So lower temperature will give you more acidity, more complexity. Higher temperature will give you more sweetness. Okay? So now we'll dose 13 grams. This was grounded at 45 on the ZP6. So keep in mind, when I brew using the Kono or the V60, I like brewing at 40 to 42. Whereas with this B75, I'm brewing usually at around 43 to 48. But most of the time, I'm at 44 to 46, just for reference. Okay, so for grind size, if you're working with a slightly darker roast, I recommend grinding a little bit finer, on the finer range of that grind size spectrum. Whereas if you're working with a lightly roasted coffee, I suggest going a little bit coarser because the flow rates will be slower. And then for the final part, which is very important, is the pouring structure, okay? So for this brew, I want a more tea-like, elegant cup. So I will do 2 pours. So this is very much the April style of pouring. So it's not very high extraction, it's focusing on complexity, and it's really suited for lightly roasted coffee. So we'll do 2 100 ml pours, very simple. The first pour, 100 ml, will be 50 grams or 50 ml circle, 50 ml center. We stop at around 40 to 45 seconds. We do the second and it's the exact same thing, all right? You can notice also when I'm brewing, I like keeping the kettle at a steady height right? So none of this thing you see a lot in TikToks and Instagram reels. Why? Because when you brew like this, there's no consistency, right? The water is going up and down. It's not a fixed height. So you don't know, like, if I'm gonna make an adjustment next time, how can I adjust? I'm doing like this. It's, yeah, pet peeve. When it comes to the pouring structure, more pours will mean more contact time, which will lead to a higher amount of sweetness and a higher amount of flavor intensity. So if you find that this style of coffee is a little bit too weak for you, you can try 3 pours. So 80, 80, and then 40. For the first 2 pours, it will also be the same, circle and center pour. But on the final pour, the last 40 ml, that's where you can kind of play around. So if you do a complete just 40 ml circle pour, you're going to get a slightly more intense cup because of the increased contact time. So it's a more flavorful experience. Whereas if you do just complete straight 40 ml, of course, it's your flow rate will be faster. It will become, the coffee will be slightly cleaner, a little bit more crisp, a little bit more light. So that's really up to you. I'm just giving you some ideas and what you want to play with when it's time for you to start brewing. So the brew is done. Let's cool it a bit and then let's taste. We've cooled the coffee down. So just another tip, when you're brewing this way, lower extraction, highlighting complexity and clarity, I would suggest enjoying the coffee at a lower temperature. And I know it's difficult to wait if you already want to have your coffee. So what I recommend to do is, after you brew onto your server, decant it into a heat sink, right? So maybe a different ceramic mug, right? Something that can absorb that heat fast. Just do that for a couple of seconds while you clean up, and then transfer the coffee back into your original server and serve. That should help a lot with cooling the brew down quickly. Okay, but of course you want to know how it tastes, so let's taste. What we wrote down on this bag is cocoa, sweet cream, floral, red berry, peanut butter, butterscotch aroma. So it's a rather complex coffee. With this style of brewing, we're getting a lot of the red berries, we're getting some of that cocoa and the floral vibe to this coffee. It's very interesting. Whereas when I brewed it with the Kono, doing a bit finer, a slightly longer brew time, the taste emphasis was on the cocoa, the peanut butter, the butterscotch, and then the red berry and the florals were like an accent to it. Whereas this style, right, the focus of the flavors is different. So that's what's fun when you're playing around with this brewer, this coffee, and this kind of pouring structure. So after the 2 months that I've been using the B75, I can really say that I've enjoyed my time with this brewer. As in, I've immensely enjoyed my time playing around with this brewer. I find that this modern style of flat bottom dripper, particularly the B75, it lets you really play around with a lot of variables, as I've explained to you earlier. And that can allow you to really find what you like in that particular coffee that you're brewing. Given that you're patient and you want to do this systematically, like I just showed you. I really enjoy the coffee I've been brewing with it because the acidity remains well integrated into the coffee experience. Meaning, as the coffee starts to cool down, the acidity doesn't spike up and doesn't become harsh and basically too sour. It just remains in sync with the rest of the flavors, presenting very balanced cup profile, and I really appreciate that, and I really enjoy it. So much so that most likely I will be keeping the flat bottom brewer in my routine, and I'm for sure going to buy more and review more and compare which of these flat bottom brewers I like the most. And of course, I'll be sharing that with you. So that's it for today's episode. I hope you found it insightful. But before you go, our goal is to hit 1,000 subscribers. We need for like 200 plus more, and it would be so great if we get to that 1,000. So please help us, subscribe, like our videos, leave a comment, and let's take this channel to the next level. That's it. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.